This is the 7th recording for 18 IT 205 Computer Programming 1. In our last recording, we looked at encapsulation, getter and setter methods, public and private access, and the three categories of variables: attributes, local variables, and parameter variables. What we're going to do in this lesson is look at calculations. Specifically, we're going to implement the Go method. And also we're going to see how this relates to our programming assignment 2, which is due on week 2. Okay, so here we go. Soft deadline Friday the 29th, hard deadline July the 1st. The description is to create a project named Converter, create a main class called Converter Runner, and another class named Converter. You probably already did that in assignment 1, and if so, you're welcome to keep that for assignment 2 and reuse that. The prompt user method of class Converter Runner should create an object instance of Converter. Now that sounds tricky, but it's not. It's exactly what we did in Driver. Okay. This is creating an object instance of vehicle and storing it in a variable of type myVehicle. That's exactly what I'm asking you to do here with Converter Runner and Converter. Make an object instance of Converter and store it in a variable of type Converter, exactly like I did here with Vehicle, except instead of Vehicle, you'll have Converter. That's all. Easy as that. The prompt user method of class Converter Runner should prompt the user for two items, a temperature and a letter, and the letter should be either C or F. These should be two different prompts, and once again, we've already done this. J-option pane show input dialog. There's our prompt. We're assigning it to a variable. And if needed, we're converting it from a string to a double. So again, don't be too intimidated. A lot of this stuff we've already done, and very much intentionally so. What we're doing in lecture is going to follow these assignments very closely. Now the C or the F, don't worry about doing anything with that right now. Just store it in a variable, that's it. But the temperature that you input, you are going to have to do something with. Okay? And also the converter class, you're going to have to do something with. You'll need a method called getCelsius, and you'll need to place this formula in that method. Okay? You'll need a method called setCelsius, and you'll need to place this formula in that method. Now you will need to make a few small changes. These words here are variables, and actually your variable is probably lowercase f and lowercase c. Fahrenheit and Celsius are actually people's names. So Word capitalizes them sometimes. But needless to say, don't necessarily think about copying and pasting these formulas verbatim. They'll want to match what you have in your class. In other words, getCelsius is going to want to take the Fahrenheit temperature, subtract 32, and multiply by 5.0 divided by 9.0. What that's going to do is that's going to take a Fahrenheit temperature, convert it to Celsius. Once you've done that, you can return that value. Remember, this method is called getCelsius, which indicates it's going to be returning a value. What you want to return is the result of this equation. setCelsius is going the other way. In that case, the method is receiving a value. We'll call that a parameter variable, and we'll name that parameter variable Celsius. For Celsius, we multiply it by 1.8, add 32. We take the result of that and store it in the attribute named Fahrenheit. I can't stress that enough. This should be in the method called setCelsius. This Celsius variable here should be a parameter variable, a method parameter. This variable here called Fahrenheit should be an attribute named Fahrenheit. If you don't know what I mean by when I say attribute and parameter variable, I honestly recommend you go back and watch the last lecture where I talk about what those are. Okay? So, there we go. A few others I kind of glazed over here. We also need a get and set Fahrenheit, and we need an attribute or an instance field named Fahrenheit. What we call attributes now, a few years ago we called them instance fields. It's the same thing. When you see store that number in the instance field named Fahrenheit, pretend it says store that number in the attribute named Fahrenheit. It's the exact same thing. Okay? So, the class called Converter, an attribute called Fahrenheit, and then four methods. Getters and setters for Fahrenheit, and then getCelsius and setCelsius. When I get your project, I should only see formulas in the get and setCelsius methods. It's the only place I should see formulas. Okay? A couple other steps here. Your converter should only have one attribute, and it should be named Fahrenheit. At least that's what I would call it. The converter runner class should invoke get Fahrenheit and get Celsius on the converter object that it has created. Okay, and then a few hints here on how to convert from a string to a double. One other thing I skipped over up above is that you're going to want to pass this temperature into, I believe it is the set Fahrenheit method. Yes, you're going to, from converter runner, you're going to want to pass the temperature value to the set Fahrenheit method of converter. Take a look at that, read that, let me know if you have any questions. Meanwhile, I'm going to go back now to what we were working on, and we're going to talk a little bit about math. Okay? One method that we've left alone so far is this go method. And in the go method, what I want to do is I want to put some mathematical operations. I'm going now to ucjava.com, and I'm going to go to 32IT205, and we're going to see, I'm going to go to variables and types, mathematical operations. No big surprise here. This talks about how we can do math. If we want to add two numbers together, it's a plus. If we want to subtract two numbers, it's a minus. Division is a slash that's on the question mark key. Multiplication is an asterisk. Modulo is remainder of division. Okay, and then there are some binary operations that we'll look at in a moment. Okay, so no big surprise. This is how we do math. Let's go back to this go method in vehicle. The go method is going to receive a parameter variable named distance. What we want to do is we want to take this distance and we want to add the distance to odometer. There are two ways I can do this. I can say, remember what odometer is, by the way, it's that attribute. So now what we're doing is we're adding a parameter to an attribute. So I say odometer equals odometer plus distance. Now when we see the equal sign here, don't think of mathematical equality. That's not equality. What we're doing is we're saying evaluate what's on the right and then assign that to what's on the left. Evaluate what's on the right and then assign that to what's on the left. Okay? This is a fairly frequent operation to add something to a number. So this is equivalent. Sorry. Let me also put I'll finish this first. Odometer plus equals distance. Line 33 is doing the same thing as line 31. This is just a shortcut that will take a value and add it to an existing value. Now I don't want to do it twice, so I'm going to go ahead and comment that out. And also I'll add a comment up here that says add the distance to the odometer. There we go. Now we also need to subtract gallons of gas. So let's compute gallons of gas used. Gallons of gas used is going to be distance divided by miles per gallon. So I'll say distance divided by miles per gallon. Okay, and I want to do something with this. So I'm going to assign it to a new local variable called gallons of, let's just say gallons used. We'll make it easy. Gallons used equals distance divided by miles per gallon. Note that's a local variable. A local variable is defined within a method and is used within a method. So remember our three categories of variables. Attribute is like an adjective. It describes a class or an object. Parameter is something that's passed into a method. And then local variable is declared and used within a method. Okay, now we'll say subtract gallons used from gallons of gas. Okay, once again I can either do gallons of gas equals gallons of gas minus gallons used. This will take what's on the right and assign it to what's on the left. Or I can do the shortcut, which is gallons of gas minus equals gallons used. These two lines are equivalent. This time we'll stick with the shortcut. I can only use one because I don't want to subtract it twice. So I'll make a note, these two lines are equivalent. And there we go. And save. Okay, So now we've done some mathematical operations in our method here called go. Okay? We've done some mathematical operations. Let's go back to driver, and we have our prompt user method. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to add some more lines to it. We're going to print the vehicle's state. Then we're going to invoke the go method on my vehicle. And then we will print the state after we have moved the vehicle. Okay? So we'll say my vehicle dot go. Let's just move it. We'll just move it 100 miles for the moment. And then we'll say my vehicle, we'll do a system out print line again. Vehicle state after move. And we will say plus my vehicle dot toString. You might notice that I've used a plus here. This is not addition. If we have a plus in this case, and at least one side, either the left or the right, is a string, it's not actually going to add like mathematically. What it's going to do is it's going to take this string and then put this string after it and return the combination of those two. It just basically sandwiches strings together. Okay, with that said, I'll save. And I'll go ahead and run, and let's see what happens this time. Okay, how many gallons of gas? Let's say 25. That's a lot actually, isn't it? How many miles per gallon? Let's say 20. How many miles on the odometer? We'll say 30,000. What I'm expecting is we're going to get two lines. One line is going to show us, what do we say, 10 gallons of gas and 30,000 miles. The next one will show us 30,100 miles because we're moving the car 100 miles. And then it'll be 5 less gallons of gas, so it should be 5 gallons of gas. Let's see. And there we go. Here is the state of the vehicle before we moved it. Then we moved it 100 miles, and this is the state afterwards. Okay, it was actually 25. That's right, it was 25 gallons of gas. So the state before moving, 25 gallons of gas, 30,000 miles on the odometer. The state after moving, 20 gallons of gas, 30,100 miles on the odometer. Okay, let's slow down now and look at this in the debugger. I'm going to right-click and choose Debug File. Remember I said you have to look at the debugger at least 3 times before it makes sense. So I choose Debug File. We get our mint green line. I can choose F8 to execute a line. Okay. How many gallons of gas? This time let's say 10 gallons of gas. Okay. F8, F8, F8. How many miles per gallon? Let's say 20. F8, F8, F8. How many miles on the odometer? Let's say 25,000. F8, F8, F8. Now we're going to print out the vehicle state. Now we're going to do something different. Notice that the tab lit up is driver. Notice that we're calling a method on a variable of type vehicle. What if I want to see what that method's going to do? So far I've just hit F8 and I've stepped over each method. What if I want to actually see what that method's going to do? If I want to see what the method is going to do, I have to press F7, which will step me into that method. So at this point I'm going to choose F7 or step into, and watch what happens. Watch the driver tab go dim and the vehicle tab light up. I choose F7 and all of a sudden we're in class vehicle. Here's another cool thing. Go down to the variables tab, and what you'll see if you expand this, these numbers probably look familiar. Odometer 25,000, miles per gallon 20, gallons of gas 10. Those are the values that we just entered into our prompts. What we're going to see here is we can watch these values change as we perform some mathematical operations. So I'm going to choose F8, and we'll see that the odometer will go from 25,000 to 25,100. Because distance, if I mouse over distance, that's a value of 100. F8, there we go. Now we're going to see a new variable called gallons used, which is going to be the distance of 100 divided by the miles per gallon of 20, and that's going to be a temporary variable, a local variable, with a value 5. We're going to subtract 5 from our gallons of gas, okay? So gallons of gas will go from 10 to 5. F8, and there we go. Now notice I'm on the closed curly that finishes this method. When I choose F8, it's going to take me back to right after where this method was called. So I choose F8, go back, and the next thing that's going to happen is we're going to print the vehicle state, which has been updated to show it has moved 100 miles. And there we are, all set. So that's how we do calculations. Now, one thing I want to show as well, which is just something kind of interesting, but I mentioned that this plus operator can be used to do math, but only if the item on the left and the item on the right are both numbers, doubles or ints in our case. If one of them's a string, it's going to be concatenation. So let me give you a puzzle. I'll just up here, I'm going to say string foo equals, the value is plus 3 plus 4. Okay? System out print line, foo, okay, plus foo. Now the question is, what is this going to print? Is it going to print the value is 7? Or is it going to print the value is 34? Let's take a look. I right click, this time I'll just choose run. The value is 34. See that? The value is 34. But wait a minute now. Wait a minute, that's not fair. Hang on, let me cancel out of this. Okay, that's not fair because we said that if there is a number on either side of a plus, it's going to do math. Well, remember, we're going to work left to right. We're going to work left to right. So what's going to happen is this plus will be evaluated first. And that's going to be a concatenation operator. In other words, put two strings together because this is a string on the left. So what it's going to do is convert this to a string and then say the value is 3. But now that entire quantity will be a string. Next, it's going to evaluate this new string that it just assembled and concatenate the 4 to it, because on this plus operator, now there's a string to the left and a number to the right. It converts the 4 to a string, concatenates it all together. Now, what if we actually did want to do the math first? In that case, I would surround the part I want to do first with parentheses. This is just like you learned back in algebra. If you want to give higher priority to one operation, put it in parentheses and that will be evaluated first. As a matter of fact, if I go back to the slides here, the order of operations is exactly like you learned back in math. This shows several more operators that we don't use, but it will evaluate multiplication and division before addition and subtraction, but you can change the order of operations by using parentheses. Okay? So now I save, and I'm going to run again. Okay, I'll cancel out of that. The value is 7. Notice when we use parentheses that it changes the order of operations. Okay, order of operations, just like we know from math, we do multiplication and division first, then we do addition and subtraction. We work left to right. If we see parentheses, we will evaluate those parentheses before evaluating anything else. We know that we can use plus for addition, and we can also use plus for concatenation. So I'll put down here a line, demonstration of plus as concatenation, and as addition. Okay, also shows using parenthesis for order of operations. Okay, I think we're all set. So this is a little bit of a shorter lecture, but this should get you well prepared for programming assignment number 2. I'm going to go ahead and post this and the NetBeans project from this lecture and the previous one. And then well, let's see. We'll just leave it at that. We'll come up and pick up the next lecture next time. So thanks again for your attention, and I look forward to see your assignments.